Alright, in this video I'm going to show you how you can break a surface up on the distance to another surface. In this situation, just the floor of coal and top of coal separated into different coal thicknesses. So, 3 different bands, 0 to 0.4 of a metre, 0.4 to 1 metre, and everything greater than 1. So first things first, colour distance from objects. This is a great tool for working out what areas are what distance. Throw in the floor surface, highlight the top surface, set your intervals. If you're not used to this tool, just right click intervals. How many intervals you're trying to break it into? In this case, only 3, so it's faster just punching in 3. And then manually go 0 to 0.4, 0.4 to 1, and then everything outside of 5 meters is different. Creating contours is going to save out lines where your change in thickness or change in distance is at these intervals, which is really good. And then creating a legend is going to save it out so I can use it over and over again. Here's one I did earlier. If I just middle mouse drag that in, I think I used a slightly different color scheme, but the numbers should all be the same. So these files can be saved out as Maptek objects and then shared between sessions. So different studio session, if you've got a standard one you always want to use, you can save it out rather than setting it up again. So highlight your top of coal and hit apply with contours on. Now the lines from this aren't going to be accurate. So here you can see what it's done, sort of coloured where you've got change in thickness and then also created contours. The reason I say these contours are not accurate, if you look here it's quite jagged, and that's because this surface is heavily simplified. So it's having trouble actually being able to work out where on this surface it goes from one distance to another distance, because it's very sparse amount of points. If I just flick to wireframe, you can see that there. It's very, very sparse. So not a whole lot of detail. It's fine for a volume, it's just hard to separate it. So what I do is I'm going to fake these surfaces. I'll just close that, or create a much higher detail surface from this. So I do that by creating a grid. I'll create one with 0.3 of a meter, Z direction, do them independently, so one file for the top of coal and one file for the floor of coal. So you can see them here. I then want to triangulate these, but I also need to make sure I preserve the boundary. So query surface boundaries and OK. You'll see them here. Now in this case the floor of coal surface has lots of tiny little boundaries. Can't really see them. If you ever have this issue, select the files, point selection mode and select all. And now I can see a couple little points up there. So it's miles away, so something's not right. There's obviously a couple little points there. I'll just delete them out of the way. And delete these boundaries that I don't need. So there's my 2 boundaries. So select the floor boundary and floor points, triangulate, switch trim boundary triangles off, and split triangulation along edge constraints on. Now what that split tool does is anything inside or outside of the polygon goes into separate files. So I found this is just a fast way of clip by polygon essentially in this case. Really handy if you're doing stockpiles and you've got say 30 stockpiles or 50 or a huge amount. You can triangulate them once and have 50 different files made, which is pretty cool. So here's my 2 folders that are created. And all I want is that top surface and that surface. Everything else can just get blown away. So delete that and delete that. I might just rename that top. So with these much more detailed surfaces, when I use this same color distance from objects tool, the contours that are created are much more accurate. And that's just due to the amount of points or detail inside of this surface. It's a funny little line there. which may play games, but we'll see how we go. There's also a few areas where the top and bottom intersect, which is obviously incorrect. Your floor surface is above your top surface or roof surface here, which is not quite right, but it just comes down to what do you want to do with those as far as volume. It's just going to come up as a cut, so they can almost be just thrown out. So there's my coloured surface. Don't really need that. Don't really need that. I'll just have a look and compare these contours for you. So this white coloured line is the old one, and you can see it's very jagged through here, whereas the green one's much smoother and follows a much more accurate change around the place. Like even here you can see that there, the green one's much more detailed and defined rather than just this little sharp triangle. So I don't need those ones at all. I've got my new ones. Now there's also a couple tiny little areas which you can work out what you want to do with those. So whether you just select them and blow them away is completely up to you. If you do, it just means that small bit of area is going to be included in the greater surrounding one. And because these are so small, I've got no problem with that. You might think otherwise though. Leave that little break in. So I think that should just about do it. All these other ones, they're big enough for me to worry about. That'll be right. So delete those. Now, the hard bit is these aren't contours. These aren't polygons. Some of them are, some of them aren't. They're all in one file. So how do I break my initial surface up by these lines? I want to use the initial surface because it keeps your data integrity, only using data that we've actually got, even though my contours are created from something else. I tried using topographic triangulation, using this split triangulation along edge constraints, so inside and outside of a loop is a different file, but it didn't play nice because these lines went to the edge of the surface. So I had to think a little bit more, and we've got a tool called Edit Fragment which separates surfaces up where they intersect. So two surfaces crossing paths get created into two different files. So to turn this contours into a surface, we've got this tool called Create Extrusion. And I can create a surface in the Z direction, and I might create it 10 meters. So pretty simple tool. I now have a file called Extrusion. And you see it looks pretty ugly, but it's actually a surface from that line. Now I want it to clearly intersect my other surface. So I'm just going to translate it down 5 meters. So there I've got a clear intersection the whole way around and every little bit. So I'll just create a copy of my top surface so I don't stuff it up. I can always re-import it. And edit fragment. So it's asked me 95 fragments have been created from the file extrusion. I don't care about that one, it's just for the process, so I'll just split it into one. And then 48 fragments have resulted from this other split. If you decrease that number, you can see the surface area changes. So everything that's smaller than this number just gets thrown into one extra file, or smaller than or remainder fragments file. So I'll do the whole lot here, 48, and hit OK. So we see this has changed into a container. I just switch off my extrusion, and all these different colours are different surfaces. A couple of really small ones. So what we want to do now is then select which ones meet the right thickness. So it's not automated, but if I then colour them to my high detail floor surface, that. Don't need contours this time. Don't need the legend. Just go for gold. Now I've got my existing scale here I can throw on there if I need to remember what's what. So you'll see it looks a bit crazy here. And that's because the polygon is so close to the edge of going plus or minus inside and outside of that boundary. So it's just changing colours quite a lot right around the very edge, just a couple of millimetres either side sort of thing. But it looks nasty now, but if I try and select all the blue ones, object select mode, that one's blue. That's got most of it. There's a little blue one there. So just hold shift and click where you've got a large level of blue. If you select something like that, just deselect by holding control. So I think that's most of the blue ones. Another one up here. That's pretty good. So to group these into one file, triangle selection mode. Select all of them. Oh, might have missed one there. Object select mode. Select a large area and hold control and select a small area, the green one, to add remove. I think that might just be 1 point. Yep, so not enough for a surface there. So same thing again, triangle selection mode. Draw a big box around what you need and then cut, paste. So under scrapbook I now have everything that is greater than 1 meter. Hide that or change the color of it. Cool. Now I might do the same for pink. So that one, that's pink. So all of that information there is pink. So if we're happy with that, same thing, triangle selection mode. Can draw a big box around it. I stuffed that up, I'll just hit select all instead. Cut, paste. So that file is smaller than 0.4 of a meter. Everything else here should be green. One little pink bit there, but not too worried about that. Or grey. Now it depends on what you want to do with the grey. Really the grey is only going to give you a inverted value, so it'll give you like a fill or cut or opposite of what you're really looking for. So I might just group all of them into one. So triangle, selected everything, cut, paste. So here I've got the in-between. Cool. So there you can see the nice clear cuts. Now as far as volumes go, just query surface volume, or you can export them out as OOT into Vulkan, whatever you prefer. Throw in your fluorocoal surface as your base. That doesn't need to be split up at all. And go for gold. So here we have information for each one, and you should be able to see a little bit of cut, which is where the surface is opposite direction. Wouldn't be too fussed about that. And then your fill is what you're after. I wouldn't use difference here because it takes into your artificial cut value. So, and here you have your different surface thicknesses. Clicking on each of them in this little report actually highlights them on screen as well. So a nice way of visualizing what's what. Another thing that's pretty cool is if I just create little bit of annotation here. Let's create a marker. And I'll change it to an A-frame sign. And greater than 1 meter is 52. Save that. And then 0.4, or smaller than 0.4, we'll shift the position to maybe here. Oh, not much there at all actually. See that there. So, these markers and my new surfaces, I can actually dump them all out as a 3D PDF. Might have been good to include the floor of coal surface there, but change that to spin. And here's my little report as such. You can switch off the surfaces you don't need. And go for gold. Anyway, that's all. Hope it all worked out for you, and let me know if you've got any questions. Cheers.